Relic had spent 4 years in medical school learning how to save lives. He had spent another 3 years on starships, treating everything from radiation burns to parasitic infections. In all that time, he had never once screamed while running down a corridor. Today would change that record. The alarm had gone off exactly 12 seconds ago. Botanical containment breach. Level 5 hazard. By the time Relic reached the laboratory door, his small fox-like body was shaking so badly that he nearly dropped his emergency kit twice. The Fenari were not known for their bravery. They were known for their exceptional medical skills and their tendency to panic at loud noises. Relic was a perfect example of his species. He slammed his paw against the door panel and burst into the botanical lab. His eyes went straight to the open containment unit, the one marked with 17 different warning symbols, the one that held samples from Verdana 7, a planet so deadly that most species refused to even orbit it. The containment field was down. The protective glass was open, and sitting on the floor beside it, legs crossed like a child at a picnic, was the ship's human engineer. Daniel Park looked up with a casual smile. In his hand was a half-eaten fruit. It was deep red, almost black, with flesh that glistened like wet meat. Relic recognized it immediately. Every medical officer in the galaxy knew what a crimson maw looked like. It was in all the textbooks, usually next to photographs of what it did to internal organs. "Oh, hey Relic," Daniel said. He gestured with the fruit. "Want some? It's actually pretty good. Kind of like a spicy mango." Relic's medical scanner was already in his trembling paw. He pointed it at the human, waiting for the readings that would tell him how many minutes Daniel had left to live. The crimson maw's toxin worked fast. Most species experienced complete organ failure within 4 minutes of consumption. The lucky ones lost consciousness after 2. The scanner beeped. Relic looked at the results. He looked at Daniel. He looked at the results again. That's not possible." He whispered that Daniel's vital signs were completely normal. His heart rate was slightly elevated. He was sweating a little, but his organs were functioning perfectly. His blood showed traces of the toxin, but his liver was breaking it down in real time, converting one of the deadliest poisons in the known galaxy into harmless waste products. "You okay there, buddy?" Daniel asked. He took another bite of the fruit. Juice ran down his chin. "You look a little pale." "Well, paler than usual." "You ate a crimson maw," Relic said. His voice came out as a squeak. "You ate a crimson maw, and you're asking if I'm okay? Is that what this is called?" Daniel examined the fruit with mild interest. "Cool name. Very dramatic. Back home, we'd probably just call it a spicy plum or something." Relic's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the laboratory floor, his emergency kit spilling open beside him. Antidotes rolled across the tiles. He had brought 17 different compounds, each one designed to counteract a specific toxin from Verdana 7. None of them were needed. The human was fine. The human was actually fine. Seriously, though, Daniel continued, completely unaware of the medical miracle he represented. "Do you guys have any salt? This could really use some salt. Maybe some chili flakes, too." "Salt," Relic repeated. The word felt strange in his mouth. "You want salt?" "Yeah. And maybe something to drink?" "My mouth is kind of tingly." Daniel paused and looked thoughtful. "Actually, that's probably the poison, right? Don't worry, it's not that bad. I've had worse from street food in Bangkok." Relic had no idea what a Bangkok was. He did not care. He was too busy watching his entire understanding of biology collapse in front of him. The crimson maw was supposed to be lethal to all carbon-based life forms. Every textbook said so. Every study confirmed it. And yet here was a human, treating it like an afternoon snack. Daniel finished the fruit and tossed the pit into a nearby waste unit. He wiped his hands on his uniform pants and stood up, stretching his arms above his head. "That hit the spot," he said. "Hey, what else do you guys have in here? I skipped lunch, and I'm still kind of hungry." Relic looked at the other containment units. The ones holding samples of the widow's kiss berry, the flesh rot mushroom, and the liquid fire nectar. Each one was marked with enough warning symbols to fill a textbook. "No," he said firmly. "Absolutely not. You need to come to the medical bay right now." "What for?" "I feel fine. Because I need to understand how you're not dead." Relic's voice cracked on the last word. His fur was standing on end. His tail had puffed up to twice its normal size. "Please, for my sanity, just come with me." Daniel shrugged. "Sure, I guess. Can we get food after?" Relic grabbed the human's arm and started pulling him toward the door. He did not answer the question. He was too busy trying to remember how to breathe normally. Behind them, the empty Crimson Maw containment unit sat open. Its warning labels glowed softly in the dim light. Somewhere in the galaxy, a biology professor was about to have a very bad day. Dr. Venna had been practicing medicine for 237 years. She had treated plagues on dying worlds. She had performed surgery in the middle of space battles. She had once reattached a Krellian's head after a particularly nasty accident with an airlock. Nothing in her long career had prepared her for the sight of a human asking if the medical bay had any snacks. "Run the scan again," she told Relic. Her 4 arms moved independently, each one operating a different piece of diagnostic equipment. "There must be an error. I've run it 6 times, Relic said. His voice was hollow. "The results are the same." Daniel sat on the examination table, swinging his legs like a bored child. "Is this going to take much longer?" "I was in the middle of fixing the secondary coolant system when I got hungry." "You got hungry," Dr. Venner repeated slowly. "So, you ate a Crimson Maw." "I didn't know that's what it was called. It looked like fruit." "I like fruit." The Calathi doctor leaned closer to her screens. Her tall frame bent almost in half as she studied the readings. Daniel's liver was doing something remarkable. It was identifying the toxin, breaking it down into component parts, and converting those parts into waste products. The process was happening in real time, faster than any organ she had ever observed. "Your body is treating this like food," she murmured. "Not poison. Food. Well, yeah, it tasted like food." Daniel scratched his chin. "Honestly, it wasn't even that spicy. Reminded me of something we have back home. Carolina Reaper peppers. Those are way worse." Relic and Dr. Venna exchanged a look. The Fenari pulled up his datapad and searched for the term. His fur immediately stood on end. "This says that capsaicin causes intense pain, burning sensations, and potential tissue damage in most species," he read aloud. "And humans eat this voluntarily? Some humans eat it competitively," Daniel said. "There are contests and everything. My cousin once ate 15 in a row. He couldn't feel his face for 2 days. It was hilarious." Dr. Venna sat down heavily in her chair. 2 of her arms hung limp at her sides. The other 2 pressed against her temples. In 2 centuries of medicine, she had never felt the need to sit down from shock. Today was full of firsts. "Relic," she said quietly, "pull up everything we have on human biology. Their evolutionary history. Their home planet. Everything." The young medic's paws moved quickly over his datapad. Information began flooding the screen. Earth, 3rd planet from a yellow star. Diverse biomes. Extreme temperature variations. Atmospheric oxygen levels that most species would consider dangerously high. Their planet has predators on every continent. Relic read. His voice grew weaker with each sentence. Venomous creatures in almost every ecosystem. Bacteria and viruses that mutate constantly. Radiation levels that would require protective gear on most worlds. He paused. They evolved there, without technology, for millions of years. "Sound about right," Daniel said cheerfully. "Earth's pretty wild. You should see Australia sometime. Everything there wants to kill you. And you survived this?" Dr. Venna asked. She sounded almost offended. "Your species looked at a world full of things trying to kill you, and you just survived?" "We did more than survive. We became the dominant species." Daniel grinned. "My grandmother used to say that humans didn't conquer Earth by being careful. We did it by being too stubborn to die." The medical bay fell silent. Outside the windows, crew members had begun gathering. Word had spread quickly through the ship. The human ate a death fruit and lived. He's asking for seconds. Come see for yourself. Relic counted at least 20 faces pressed against the glass. Tolani and Fenari and Kelethian species he couldn't even name, all staring at Daniel with a mixture of horror and fascination. What happens now? Daniel asked. He seemed genuinely unaware of the crowd watching him. Can I go back to work? That coolant system isn't going to fix itself. Dr. Venna looked at her screens one more time. Every reading confirmed what should have been impossible. The human was healthy. The human was fine. The human was complaining about missing lunch. Captain Soreth will want to speak with you, she said finally. You breached quarantine protocols. There will be questions. Fair enough. Daniel hopped off the examination table. Hey, Relic, thanks for caring enough to panic. That was actually pretty sweet. Relic's mouth opened, but no words came out. He watched the human walk toward the door, wave casually at the crowd outside, and disappear down the corridor like nothing unusual had happened. Doctor, Relic said slowly, what exactly are humans? Dr. Venna stared at her screens for a long moment. 237 years of experience, and she had no answer to give. I don't know, she admitted, but I think we need to find out. The temperature in Captain Soreth's quarters hovered just above freezing. Most crew members avoided this room. The cold was necessary to maintain the captain's crystalline structure, but it made organic species deeply uncomfortable. Daniel didn't seem to notice. He sat wrapped in a thermal blanket, his breath forming small clouds in the air, looking more curious than nervous. Soreth stood near the viewport, their body catching the dim blue light and scattering it across the walls. The Malvori were ancient beings, their forms grown from mineral compounds over centuries rather than born. They thought slowly, spoke carefully, and rarely showed emotion. But right now, there was a tension in Soreth's posture that Daniel recognized as annoyance. Explain, the captain said. The word echoed through the room like a struck bell. You broke 17 safety protocols. You breached a level 5 containment unit. You consumed a substance classified as lethal to all known carbon-based life. Explain why. Daniel shrugged inside his blanket. I was hungry. It looked like fruit. I ate it. That is not an explanation. That is a list of actions. With respect, Captain, I'm not sure what else to tell you. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Where I come from, we have a saying. If you see something weird, poke it. If it poked back, poke it harder. Soreth was silent for a long moment. Their crystalline form hummed faintly as they processed this information. Your species investigates unknown threats by provoking them deliberately? Pretty much. It's how we figured out most things back home. Which mushrooms were safe to eat. Which animals could be tamed. Which plants made good medicine. Daniel smiled. Trial and error. Heavy emphasis on the error part. A lot of early humans didn't make it. The ones who did were the stubborn ones. The reckless ones, you mean? Same thing, really. Soreth turned from the viewport. In the blue light, their body looked almost like ice, sharp and cold and ancient. They had lived for 300 years. They had commanded vessels across the galaxy. They had met hundreds of species and studied their histories. Humans were relatively new to space. Most galactic records describe them as fragile newcomers from a small, unremarkable world. Those records, Soreth realized, were dangerously incomplete. Your planet, the captain said slowly. Tell me about it. Earth? It's nice. Blue skies. Green forests. Lots of water. Daniel paused. Also earthquakes, hurricanes, volcanoes, ice ages, mass extinctions, and about 1,000,000 different ways to die. But we like it there. And you evolved on this world? Without intervention? Without technology? For a few million years, yeah? Tools came later. Fire helped a lot. Language was big. But mostly we just kept trying to survive and eventually got good at it. Daniel's expression grew thoughtful. My grandmother had a theory about that. She said humans were too stupid to know when to give up. So we just kept going when other species would have quit. A faint cracking sound echoed through the room. Soreth looked down and noticed a thin fracture running along their left arm. Stress damage. It had been decades since anything had surprised them enough to cause that. I am beginning to understand, the captain said carefully, why the Galactic Council has been watching your species so closely. Daniel's eyebrows rose. They have. Before Soreth could respond, the door chimed. It slid open to reveal Relic, his small body shivering violently in the cold. The young medic's eyes were wide with panic. This was not unusual. What was unusual was the data pad clutched in his trembling paws. Captain, Relic said, his teeth chattering. I've been researching. I found something. Speak. Verdana. 7 has 12 other species of fruit classified as lethal. Relic's first stood on end. 12. And according to the botanical database, 3 of them have similar chemical structures to Earth foods. The toxins might not work on humans at all. Soreth's form cracked again. Another fracture, this one running down their torso. They looked at Daniel, who was now grinning with obvious interest. Really? The human said. Which ones? No, Soreth said immediately. I could test them. For science. Absolutely not. Just a small bite of each. Controlled conditions. Relic could monitor me. Relic made a sound that was half whimper, half scream. His data pad slipped from his paws and clattered to the floor. Daniel picked it up and started scrolling through the list of deadly flora with the enthusiasm of a child looking at a menu. Widow's Kiss, he read aloud. Flesh rot mushroom. Liquid fire nectar. These names are amazing. Who comes up with these? Soreth's crystalline form cracked a third time. The sound was loud enough to echo off the walls. 300 years of composure, 300 years of careful control, and this one human was undoing it in a single conversation. We will discuss this further, the captain said. Their voice had lost some of its steadiness. Tomorrow, after I have had time to consult with the medical staff and review all relevant protocols. Daniel stood up, still wrapped in his thermal blanket. Fair enough. But Captain, I really think this could be valuable research. If humans can survive things other species can't, that's important information. It could save lives. Soreth said nothing. They watched the human leave, trailed by a deeply traumatized Relic. The door closed behind them, leaving the captain alone with their fractured body and their troubled thoughts. This mission was supposed to be routine. A simple planetary survey. Nothing more. Soreth looked down at the cracks spreading across their crystalline form and wondered if anything involving humans could ever truly be routine. Pip had been bright yellow for most of their life. It was a cheerful color, warm and optimistic, perfect for a young Tolani working their first job on a starship. But for the past 3 hours, Pip had been completely white. They had pressed themselves into the far corner of the botanical lab and refused to move, and one blamed them. Everyone else was having similar reactions. Daniel sat at the center of the lab, surrounded by containment units that had been carefully opened under strict protocols. In front of him was a tray containing 12 different samples, each one labeled with warning symbols. Dr. Venna stood nearby with monitoring equipment. Relic stood behind her, clutching an emergency kit and whimpering softly. Okay, Daniel said, rubbing his hands together. Where do we start? Perhaps with something less immediately lethal, Dr. Venna suggested. She pointed to a small purple berry. The widow's kiss. Causes cardiac arrest in most species within 6 minutes. Looks like a grape. Daniel picked it up and popped it into his mouth without hesitation. He chewed thoughtfully. Tastes like black licorice. Not bad. Kind of bitter, though. Relic's scanner beeped frantically. He stared at the readings, then at Daniel, then back at the readings. His heart rate increased by 12%. That's it. That's the only effect. Note it. Dr. Venna's 4 arms moved quickly, recording data on multiple devices. Next sample, please. Daniel reached for a small brown mushroom, the flesh rot fungus. According to the database, it dissolved organic tissue on contact. Several crew members near the door covered their eyes. Daniel bit into it like it was a common button mushroom. His expression grew thoughtful. Needs butter, he said after a moment. And maybe some garlic. On its own, it's kind of bland. From the corner, Pip turned an even paler shade of white. They made a small chirping sound that might have been a scream. The testing continued. Daniel worked through the samples methodically, providing flavor reviews for each one. The scarlet tongue leaf tasted like mint with a metallic finish. The death blossom petals were surprisingly sweet. The void berries were sour, but refreshing. "This one's interesting," Daniel said, holding up a small vial of golden liquid. "What is it?" "Liquid fire nectar," Relic answered. His voice was barely a whisper. "It dissolves organic tissue on contact. Most species die before they can swallow it." Daniel shrugged and drank the entire vial in one gulp. He was silent for a moment. Then he smacked his lips. "Reminds me of cheap whiskey," he said. "Burns going down, but not in a bad way. You guys have any ice?" Dr. Venna's upper left arm stopped moving. Her stylus clattered to the floor. In 200 years of practice, she had never dropped a medical instrument. She stared at Daniel with an expression that mixed scientific fascination with pure disbelief. "Your throat should be gone," she said slowly. "Your stomach lining should be dissolving. Your internal organs should be liquefying as we speak." It was a bit spicy. Daniel patted his stomach. "But I've had hotter. Street vendors in Mumbai sell this one sauce that makes your whole face go numb. This is nothing compared to that." By now, half the crew had gathered outside the lab. They pressed against the windows, watching the human consume sample after sample of galactic-level poisons. Some of them were taking notes. Others were filming on their personal devices. A few had simply sat down on the floor, too shocked to stand. Captain Soreth arrived just as Daniel finished the final sample. The Malvori captain looked at the empty containers, then at the human, then at the diagnostic screens showing completely stable vital signs. "All 12? Soreth asked. "All 12, Dr. Venna confirmed. He survived all of them." He said the mushroom needed garlic. A long crack appeared along Soreth's forearm. The captain did not seem to notice. "I've been ranking them by flavor," Daniel offered helpfully. "Do you want to see my list?" "The Crimson Maw is still my favorite, but the Death Blossom is a close second." Before anyone could respond, the ship's communications system chimed. A message appeared on the main screen. It bore the official seal of the Galactic Science Council. Dr. Venna read it aloud. "To the crew of the Wandering Light, we have received reports of unprecedented biological tolerance in a human crew member. The Council requests immediate transport of all research data and the subject in question to Station 12 for extended study. Compliance is mandatory." The lab fell silent. Daniel's easy smile faded slightly. He looked at the message, then at Relic, then at Captain Soreth. "Subject," he repeated. "They called me a subject?" Relic felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had spent his whole life being nervous about everything. But this was different. This was the kind of nervousness that came from sensing something deeply wrong. "Captain," he said quietly, "something about this message feels bad." Soreth's crystalline form hummed with tension. "I agree, young medic. I agree completely." In the corner, Pip had curled into a small ball. Their color had shifted from white to a dull gray. Whatever was coming next, none of them were ready for it. Station 12 was not a welcoming place. It hung in the void like a metal spider, all sharp angles and cold efficiency. The corridors were white and sterile. The staff wore identical gray uniforms. Nobody smiled. Daniel noticed these things as they walked him through the facility. He noticed how the guard positioned themselves to block the exits. He noticed how the scientists looked at him the way a child might look at a new toy. He noticed how nobody asked his name. They called him the subject. Every single time. "Please sit," said the lead researcher, a tall being with pale blue skin and eyes that never blinked. Her name tag read Dr. Solon. "We have many tests to conduct." Daniel sat in the chair they indicated. It was bolted to the floor. The restraints on the armrests were clearly visible. They hadn't used them yet, but they were there. "What kind of tests?" he asked. "Comprehensive ones." Dr. Solon did not elaborate. She turned to her colleagues and began speaking in a language Daniel didn't recognize. They gestured at charts. They pointed at him. They used words he couldn't understand but could guess the meaning of: weaponization, replication, asset acquisition. Daniel's easy smile had disappeared completely by now. He was starting to understand what was happening. The Council didn't want to study human biology out of scientific curiosity. They wanted to use it, copy it, own it. "How long will I be here?" he asked the doctor. Solon looked at him with those unblinking eyes. "As long as necessary." And if I want to leave, that is not an option currently available to you. The words hung in the air like a sentence. Daniel looked at the restraints on the chair. He looked at the guard by the door. He looked at the scientist who refused to see him as a person. For the first time since this whole thing started, he felt afraid. 3 levels down, in a corridor that visitors rarely saw, Relic was eavesdropping. He had followed the research team after they took Daniel. He had hidden behind equipment panels and supply crates. His small Fenari body was good for sneaking, even if his nerves made him terrible at everything else. Now he pressed his ear against a ventilation grate and listened to the council scientists talk. The human's tolerance is remarkable, one was saying. If we can isolate the genetic factors responsible, we could create soldiers immune to chemical weapons. Agents who can survive any environment. The military applications alone would be worth trillions. And the human himself? Extended detention. Indefinite study. He doesn't need to consent. The Council has authority over all matters of galactic security. Relic's blood ran cold. His entire body trembled. Every instinct told him to run, to hide, to pretend he had heard nothing. But then he thought about Daniel. Daniel, who had eaten death fruit and asked for salt. Daniel, who had thanked Relic for caring enough to panic. Daniel, who was somewhere above him right now, probably realizing that he had been betrayed by the very galaxy he had tried to join. Relic was not brave. He had never been brave. But sometimes being brave meant doing the right thing even when you were terrified. He turned and ran toward the docking bay as fast as his legs could carry him. Captain Soreth was waiting on the ship when Relic burst through the airlock. So was Dr. Venna. So was Pip, who had finally shifted from gray to a pale blue that indicated worry. They want to keep him, Relic gasped out. He was wheezing badly. His lungs burned. Forever. They want to use him. Weapons. Soldiers. They don't see him as a person. Soreth's crystalline form went very still. You are certain of this? I heard them myself. They called him an asset. A resource. Relic's voice cracked. Captain, we have to do something. He's our crew member. He's our friend. The word hung in the air. Friend. When had that happened? When had the strange human who ate poison for fun become someone worth fighting for? Soreth looked at Dr. Venna. The old Kelethi doctor nodded slowly, her 4 arms crossed in determination. Soreth looked at Pip. The young Talani's color shifted to a deep red. Anger. Resolve. The human is a member of my crew, Captain Soreth said. Their voice resonated through the ship like a struck bell. He came aboard my vessel. He trusted my authority. He is under my protection. Cracks spread across Soreth's arms and torso. The captain did not seem to care. We are going to get him back. Relic felt something shift inside him. The fear was still there. It would always be there. But underneath it was something else. Something stronger. Purpose. Tell me what to do, he said. Soreth told him the plan. Dr. Solon was explaining the next phase of testing when the alarm started. Red lights flashed across the sterile white walls. A voice announced an unauthorized transmission. Station security rushed toward the communications center. Daniel looked up from his chair. For the first time in hours, he smiled. That's my ride, he said. Captain Soreth appeared in the doorway like a force of nature. Their crystalline body was covered in cracks, but their voice rang out clear and strong. The human is a member of my crew. He returns with us. This is not a request. Dr. Solon stepped forward. You have no authority here. The Council has jurisdiction over matters of galactic security. I disagree. Soreth's form hummed with barely contained energy. 1 hour ago, I transmitted all research data to the human embassy on Earth. Every major scientific journal in the sector received copies. 3 independent news networks are currently broadcasting our findings. The captain paused. Your subject is now the most famous human in the galaxy. What happens to him next will be watched by billions. The color drained from Dr. Solon's face. Her unblinking eyes finally showed emotion. Fear. You cannot do this, she said. The council will do nothing. Soreth stepped closer. Because the galaxy is watching. Because Earth is watching. And because if anything happens to this human, the consequences will fall directly on your shoulders. Behind Soreth, Relic appeared. Then Dr. Venna. Then Pip, whose body had turned a fierce shade of crimson. The crew of the Wandering Light stood together, facing down the entire Galactic Science Council. For Daniel, the standoff lasted 30 seconds. It felt like hours. Then Dr. Solon stepped back, her jaw tight with fury. "Take him," she said. "But this is not over. We're counting on it." Sorith extended one cracked arm toward Daniel. "Come, engineer. We have a ship to return to." Daniel stood up from the chair. His legs were a little shaky. His heart was pounding. But when he looked at his crew, at the aliens who had risked everything to bring him home, he felt something warm spread through his chest. "Thanks," he said quietly. "I didn't think. I mean, you are one of us," Sorith said simply. "That is enough." They walked out together, past the silent guards and the furious scientists, through the cold corridors and back to the docking bay where the Wandering Light waited. Nobody stopped them. 3 hours later, the ship was back in open space. The council station was a distant speck of light behind them. The danger had passed, at least for now. Daniel found Relic in the medical bay. The young Fenari was sitting alone, eating nutrient paste directly from the tube. His fur was still slightly puffed from stress. "Hey," Daniel said, sitting down beside him. "Hey." Relic didn't look up. "Are you okay?" "I am now." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "You came for me. You all came for me. Your crew. It's more than that." Daniel turned to face him. "Relic, you were scared out of your mind from the moment we met. Every time I ate something, you looked like you were going to faint. But when it mattered, when I really needed help, you were the one who figured out what was happening. You were the one who got the captain." Relic's ears flattened against his head. "I was terrified the whole time. That's what bravery is." Daniel smiled. "Being scared and doing it anyway. My grandmother taught me that." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The hum of the ship filled the space between them. "On Earth," Daniel said eventually, "we have a saying. Family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up for you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small red fruit. A crimson maw. He had smuggled it from the station during the chaos. "Want to share?" Relic stared at the deadly fruit. Every medical text he had ever read screamed at him to refuse. Every survival instinct in his body told him this was a terrible idea, but Daniel was offering it to him. Daniel, who had shown him that courage didn't mean being fearless. It meant acting despite the fear. With trembling paws, Relic took the fruit. He brought it to his mouth. He took the tiniest possible bite. Fire exploded across his tongue. His entire body seized. His fur stood completely on end. Tears streamed down his face. His throat burned like he had swallowed a star. "How does it taste?" Daniel asked. Relic coughed and wheezed and gasped for breath. His voice came out as a croak. "Like friendship," he managed. "Painful, confusing friendship." Daniel laughed, so hard he nearly fell off his seat. The sound echoed through the medical bay, warm and genuine and full of joy. Relic laughed too, despite the tears and the burning and the absolute certainty that he was going to regret this tomorrow. Because sitting here, next to the strangest human in the galaxy, he realized something important. He had found his family among the stars, and that was worth any amount of pain.